Hello, and welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm CJ.
And I'm Chip.
And I'd like to welcome our BCC Radio people. We're going live today to BCC Radio, so you'll be hearing it before anyone else. So thank you for listening, and thank you always for watching. Got a couple of issues to bring up today that we definitely want to talk about. As we know, the budget is in a financial mess, but we're finding out more and more that our school department budget is even worse. We received information from, again, our inside sources, and it's very interesting what we find out. Currently, there are two different budget numbers that are out there, and neither of them meet what they call net school spending, which I'll refer to several times throughout the show as NSS. The most recent proposals were $94 or $99 million. Both of which do not meet net school spending. Businessmen in the city that have seen some of this information and have seen it are saying very clearly that they're playing with the numbers, which we've said I don't know how many times. But I received a proposed budget for the city for fiscal year 2015, which shows that for fiscal year 2014, the city came in at $2,815,510 under net school spending. That's the shortfall. The proposed budget for fiscal year 2015 is a $5,637,395 net school spending shortfall. Here's the problem. The city administration believes they can carry forward to fiscal year 16 the shortfalls from 14 and 15. So our superintendent did some due diligence, and she contacted the Department of Education. And in the reply from the Department of Education, I will quote it, John J. Sullivan on April 25th sent to Michael Saunders at Fall River Schools, the law states districts must meet their NSS or net school spending targets. If they don't spend at least 95% of the requirement, the district is penalized and loses state aid. That's what they call Chapter 70 money. If the shortfall is under 5%, the amount carries forward and is added to the next year's requirement. And that response was generated because Michael Saunders from the Fall River School Department asked specifically about what items are eligible, what items are not eligible, and if we don't meet the net school spending, what happens. For instance, they wanted to find out, is crossing guards meet net school spending? No, they don't. Is the short-term loan interest is not eligible? The switchboard and the mailroom are central data processing, as the city wanted to clarify it, and that would make it net school eligible, but it is not under 603 CMR 10.04 1A. So those costs are not eligible. They're trying to find everything to meet this net school spending. And the problem is the administration can't come up with $100 and some odd thousand that they have to, which I believe the school's fiscal year 2015 school spending plan is $124,029,627, which doesn't even meet the net school spending. They come in at 95.7%. And in the fiscal year 2014 budget, which is this one, they spent $120,169,012, which was 97.7% of the net school spending. They have to do 100%. And that's why they're $2,815,000 short, which they have to include in next year's budget. But they can't. They don't have the money. It seems like we're playing with numbers all over the place, and the worst part about it is this budget is due in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks it's due. What are we going to do, Chip? What are we going to do? I'm lost.
Well, I guess we're going to have to do some more creative accounting, because that seems to be what's happening. But I think after Tuesday City Council meeting, it's pretty clear that the city is broke. They don't They have basically don't have two nickels to rub together, and they're even using last year's fiscal year. The healthcare figures they used were from June 30th of 13, and we're in fiscal year 14, and we're going, and 15, and going into we're going into 15. And right now, after some meetings with the city, they're saying that they're not even gonna talk about any free money until 16, FY 16. So it's, you know, it's difficult. And of course, on the school side, the numbers are just so large we're dealing with. I mean, I'm looking at the administration. They have 1,000 administrators according to this, and I think there's around 14 schools in the city. That comes out to about 72 administrative jobs per school. So, gee, I don't know. We've got a lot of overhead, a lot of administration, and it's costing a lot of money. And the problem is that with the school department, if we don't spend that particular amount of money, we actually lose money, because our school system is basically run on Chapter 70 money. So you know, we're in a catch-22 here. You know, they're trying to find money, and they're trying to rewrite the laws to allow them to meet some of these thresholds, and it's just not happening.
It's pathetic. It really is pathetic. And I understand we're in a fiscal tight-belted situation, and we don't have the money. But when the administration, the finance team, if you want to call them that, comes forward and says to the city council on Tuesday, we got $134,000 in the employer account. But in June 30th of 2013, we had $4.1 million in the employee trust account. And they're supposed to have 3 times that amount, which is $12 million. But they say, oh no, we don't do it that way. We do it by paying having 3 months worth of bills in that account at all times. Wait a minute, is this a violation? You know, I mean, and I spoke with Mr. Bertrand yesterday at the Department of Revenue, and we went over this in detail. And you know, he had told me that he's received several phone calls from people from the city of Fall River, elected officials even, and he told them the same thing. The mayor must request the audit, and the city council must approve the payment for the audit, and then the Department of Revenue and the state auditor will come down and do the audit. If it doesn't follow that process, they can't do it. And he also stated very clearly that we are not the enforcement arm of the state. We only require people to keep the regulations. If they don't, we turn it over to the Attorney General, who is in an election year and doesn't want to do anything. Isn't politics wonderful?
Oh, it certainly is. And the fact is, it is a violation of the law, because the 25-75 split that they said that they don't have to, they don't do it that way, is actually an obligation the city has. If you look at every collective bargaining agreement with every labor union in the city, in addition to their pay, the 75-25 split is defined within their contract. And just as when they sign a contract, the city is required and has a fiduciary responsibility to provide the money and fund those pay raises, the health care, 75% on the city side, should be funded also, because that is a contractual obligation. That is a valid contract between the city and the various labor unions. So for them to say that this is the way they do it, they're basically saying that they're not abiding by their fiduciary responsibilities, and they're actually violating the law.
Sounds like malfeasance to me.
Yeah, it sounds like gross malfeasance. And the question here is, you know, everybody is fixated on the problem that we're facing with the city today. But I want to remind everybody that on Spindle City Straight Talk, we've been talking about the city being broke for almost a year. And at last year's budget, when former city administrator Sean Kadim said that this budget was on firm financial footing, it was sustainable. Apparently, you know, he had a little dyslexia when he was reading the numbers, because we can't go from a budget that was said to be sustainable to looking at next year's budget with fundamentally not very many new additions, and then have the mayor say we have a $16 million deficit.
You know, but didn't Sean Kadim say that the school department budget was unsustainable last year?
Yeah, he did say the school department budget was unsustainable. However, he said the city side was sustainable. But the problem is, none of it was sustainable. The fact is, we knew, and we've said numerous times on this show, that counting federal money, as they did with the SAFER grant, as city money, you know, is the road to bankruptcy, because you can't count other people's money in your budget.
Right.
I mean, I wish I could count my neighbor's paycheck into my budget, but I can't. And the fact is that we have state funds, state grants, and federal grants, and that's what the budget was shored up with, yet they were treating it as though the budget was funded, even though most of that funds weren't their funds. And when those funds disappear, this is what we're left with.
You know, and the administration will tell us that without those grants and without that money, we would not be able to have the services we have. But I can remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chip, 20 years ago, when the city funded the police, the city funded the fire department, and we weren't dependent upon federal grants. We would get federal grants for things that we would do, and they were done as, you know, nice things to have. They were done as we want, so we can get the grant for that. Now we're looking at the federal grant as what I have called Fall River for a long time as a welfare check, because without it, we can't do anything. I mean, am I wrong in that impression? Am I reading it wrong? I mean,
No, you're 100% correct. You know, we've evolved into a welfare city. As a matter of fact, when I got on the fire department, we had a 300-man department. That's almost double what the mayor originally wanted to fund now, and every single job was funded by the city. We ultimately got down to about 240, 250, but they were all funded by the city. And somewhere along the line, the problem is that the SAFER grant that they ran the fire department with, number one, that grant is there to allow you to increase manpower for a short-term period while you find the money to fund the positions. So you don't just take it to subsidize your department. It's there to supplement your department. And what they did was they pumped in the federal money, and they stole, well, I guess you can't accuse them of stealing because it's city money, but in a way, they stole it and they appropriated it in other areas. They said, well, we don't have to take $14 million over the next 2 years for the fire department. We'll just take that and we'll spend it. But the problem is, when you commit that money to other areas, it's committed, and you can't get it back. And then when the grant dries up, you haven't lived up to the obligation you had when you got that grant. And I believe our congressional delegation said that in a letter to the city that said, what did you do to plan to sustain these jobs when the grant went away? And the answer to that was absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, in the city's case, the grants have become a negative, because it seems as though whenever we get a grant, whatever money in that department was there, we take and we use it in another place, and we use the grant to sustain that department. And ultimately, all grants dry up.
Yeah, and you know, the federal government is cutting down on a lot of these grant programs, not only for SAFER grants, but for other programs, because the federal government is experiencing that fiscal crunch. And we can look at other being cut. You know, last year or the year before, even the community development block grant had to look at a 7 or 17% cut in that grant money. So they planned accordingly. You know, Mr. Dion is very good at doing his job, so he planned accordingly, and he took money away. But when the money came in and it was a little higher than they expected, they put some of that money back. The only statement that bothered me was that if we didn't put it back, people were going to be out of work. And you know, there's a lot of you out there that will say, well, you're going to put people out of work. You can't do that. we are the city of Fall River, a municipal corporation. We are not the city of Fall River Workforce Center. And I think that's one of the problems that people think that, well, we got 75 jobs here we might lose, and it's detrimental. And I hate thinking about it, but we can't say that it's our responsibility to keep those people working, especially when we're going out and we're hiring our friends and our contributors and giving them high-paying, do-nothing jobs.
Well, that's one of the major problems historically, even on the school side, with net spending. They create positions, and as we were talking on a panel show to a school committeeman, and I believe you asked the question, when you create these jobs, what happens when the funding goes away? And he said they're absorbed into the system, which is probably the reason that we've ended up with an average of 72 administrative positions per school, which seems like an awful lot for me. But on the city side, they will lay firefighters and police off. As a matter of fact, that has been the primary reason in every city and town in this state that looked at a Proposition 2.5 override, because they wanted to supplement fire protection. And that's wrong. They use that as a lever because they don't hesitate to lay off. They were going to lay off 60 firefighters. That wasn't a problem. But we can't have a double standard. We can't say, well, we can't lay anybody off in the school department because we had this grant money before. We had the net school spending. We created. Well, you have to. As you said, the city is not an employment agency. If you run a company, and this is a company, and this company is designed to deliver essential services to its citizens, to provide police and fire protection and education and trash pickup, those are the first things you pay, like you do in your home. Your electric light bill, your heat bill, your mortgage. You have to pay these things. And the fact is that we are not here to become the largest employer in the city and end up with a giant bureaucratic government, because it's a catch-22. Because if we continue to have positions that we don't need, we continue to burden the taxpayer to the point of breaking the taxpayer. And I'll remind everybody that Fall River only has, and it may be lower now, but only 37% of the people in Fall River own their own homes. And that's a very, very low figure, because everybody with money has basically moved out, and the rest of the people here are now being burdened with increased sewer rates, increased taxes, and now the attack on the health care and the school department. It's just, it's just mismanagement. There's no way around it. You can't sugarcoat it. This city has been mismanaged, and that's the bottom line.
You're right. And, I think the first lead I ever saw that was proper by the city council was to deny the water and sewer rate changes and didn't accept them. And I've got to give kudos to Linda Pereira and Dan Rigo and those Mike Mioza and those people who said no. The people of Fall River can't afford it anymore. They're already giving them a 2.5% raise in next year's budget in taxes, and now they're coming back and saying they want more money. Well, Terry Sullivan came to us several months ago and said we need a base meter fee increase, which I saw for the first time on my bill, by the way, because I just got my bill. And amazing, it got my bill and it's higher, much higher. And we look at this. When you are hired on a grant in the real world, if you are hired on a grant, when that grant expires, your job expired. And you know that when you take that job. But in Fall River, when you're hired on a grant, your job doesn't go away. Instead, we just absorb that salary into our budget and causes us more chaos. And that's a big problem, especially when you're dependent on that grant money for those salaries. When the grant money goes away, and you've given somebody a $20,000 or $30,000 a year raise, they're still getting the $20,000 or $30,000 a year raise because you don't get rid of them. And I wasn't shocked, but I was slightly appalled when the city council denied the water and sewer fee increases And community leaders, several of them, not all of them, a couple of them, came out and said, I'll pay $60 more for clean water. And Terry Sullivan, you're doing a great job for Fall River. We've had nothing but problems with the water department. We've had questions on the water department, what's happening. But some people are willing to say, I'll pay $60 more for water. I mean, are you willing to pay $60 more for water?
Well, you know, as I said in front of the council, there are a lot of people that always, that's the old political ploy of, yeah, you know, we should, I believe Mr. Fiola said, you know, we're getting a really big tax break. Well, I guess they don't look at the ratios and the proportions. Yeah, we do have a lower tax rate than some cities, but we also have the second lowest per capita income in the state. You know, Newton has a lower tax rate than us, and their average household income is $113,000, and Fall Rivers is $34,000. The only town with a lower per capita income is household income is Lawrence, and they're the only city with fewer businesses, and you know, there's a correlation there. And the problem is the people who say that are the same people who said that the GIC was a good health care plan. Those are the people, like some of our state reps and senators, who get a 17% increase over 3 years in their base salary, and then they get thousands of dollars in per diem. They get $90 a day for driving to Boston, and they don't pay state tax. And then when they leave state office, they get jobs at Bristol Community College that they have to show up 4 times a year for and get $129,000, like our former state senator Joan Menard.
Right.
And the problem is that, yeah, I wouldn't mind if somebody gives me a $40,000 pay raise and now bumps up my retirement to where I'm going to make more retired than I did when I was a senator. Well, I'll give you the 60. It's like the people who are willing to give the 5% back to the city when they make a across-the-board pay cut, when they got a 40% pay raise. Because the last time I checked mathematically, if I get a 40% pay raise and I give 5% back, I still got a 35% pay raise. So if you want to do that, that's fine. And as I said before the council, if you want to give me the money that the state reps get every year in their cost of living, if you want to give me the increases in salary that they get, maybe I would be willing to pay too. But they have to realize that Fall River, they are the few. They don't comprise the majority of people in Fall River. Fall River is an economically depressed city. That's the reason we can't attract businesses, and we can't sustain businesses. People just don't have the money. And to impose those kind of burdens on them is patently unfair. And those people, as far as I'm concerned, you know, they're everything that's wrong with Fall River. And to say that Terry Sullivan's done a good job when he blew a grant for the CSO because he was on vacation, he should have been fired years ago.
I agree, and I said that many times. And the thing is, do you know what the average annual income is for the United States? The whole country.
Nationally, I haven't looked at that recently.
I looked at the state average. It's $35,900 plus or minus a few bucks. So we're even below that.
That's the individual income.
Right.
Yeah, Fall Rivers is 20.
Yeah. See, I mean,
20.
That's 20.
I mean, the average individual income is higher than the household income in Fall River.
Right.
The household income is $34,000. The individual income is $20,000.
And that's what I'm saying. We're lower than the national income for an individual throughout the country.
Yeah.
And $35,900 for one person. Okay, we're $20,000 in Fall River, $35,000 for the whole family, or $34,000 for the whole family. Excuse me. So we're even below the national average for the whole family.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of extra money to just throw away.
Sure.
And that's scary. It really is scary because for some reason, the administration and the city council think, you can afford it. Look at all the houses we're building. Look at all the houses we're building. They're knocking down old schools and throwing up 8 houses, and they're having a difficult time selling them because nobody wants to move to Fall River. So they're making great deals with the Community Development Agency for first-time home buyers to lock that home into affordable housing type loans. And they have to do that because they've got no other choice. But, you know, what are we looking at really for Fall River? I mean, people want the glorious Fall River of days long gone by. We killed that. We killed that days of long gone by. I didn't. It wasn't my generation that did it. It was my generation that watched it happen because we were young. We were teenagers when it was all happening. And, you know, I can remember statements from state senators and mayors and, you know, for instance, the Justice Center, a big courthouse in the middle of Fall River with no parking available, and that is going to be a boom to Fall River because it's going to bring tons of people in for coffee and lunches, and they're going to leave the courthouse and go out for drinks. What fantasy land is that? Anyone have an idea? Because I mean, I don't even think Peter Pan knows what fantasy land that is.
I guess the only time that ever was a success was when they were trying Aaron Hernandez, and a couple of medias had to come down and rent some space down there. They had a little extra business, but I haven't seen a huge boom in downtown. I've seen a lot of criminals walking around down there going to court, and I've seen a lot of traffic down there, but I don't see a lot of business. You know, the reality is that you know, they continue that. You know, we have these ridiculous solutions like lights on the Braga Bridge. That's going to be good for Fall River, and the carousel. You know,
how many people was that supposed to bring?
Well, actually, the initial figure, and I'm sure that Mr. Fiola will not remember this, but I sat on the board of Heritage State Park when they're going to build the carousel, and he produced a document that said we were going to get about 500,000 tourists. I don't think we've had 500,000 tourists since they built it. It's been a giant pink elephant since it was built. It's lost money all the time, and now they're going to try to resurrect it again. You know, and maybe they can, you know, find some other thing to go with that, and the HMS Bounty and all the other albatrosses that we've figured out.
You know, you and I have said this many times that we couldn't write this stuff. We just can't do it. And, you know, I doubt anyone's even going to remember something called A Penny Dreadful. A Penny Dreadful was a small novella type of deal. You know, you pay a penny for it, and it was a horror story. Well, let me tell you something. This is a horror story, and if we put this in a book, they might make it a movie.
Well, you know, actually, Showtime's got a new series called Penny Dreadful, and who knows? Maybe one of the episodes will be on Fall River.
There you go. You never know. Well, I mean, it's been an interesting run this week. Besides all the death threats I got, I mean, Chipper had to come out to my defense. But I want you all to have a great day. Thank you for watching the show. And keep those tips coming in. Use our phone number or use our email address. They're all stripped of your identity, so we don't know who you are. So please, keep watching, keep safe, and let your voice be heard.
Stay active and stay informed.